I'm Shane Hoefer, CEO of Rocky Mountain Forest Products, and today I am with what title do you have? I forget.
General badass,
Oh my
property
God.
manager, general contractor, electrician. Um,
Head of Property Maintenance and Construction, Trevor Farrar.
Overachiever.
This is going to be an interesting podcast. Trevor expressed interest in being in this podcast, and at first I was like, he's not my typical podcast guest. But our interactions never cease to entertain. I think this is going to be an interesting podcast from the standpoint that millennials and Gen Z are consistently badmouthed or disparaged by Gen X management. I hear it all the time from colleagues that they're lazy, they don't want to work. And I think that the relationship that Trevor and I have kind of epitomizes what a successful relationship could look like between Gen X and Gen Z. You never know where the hell this is going to go. So I don't know what this podcast is going to entail. Normally when I have a podcast guest, I'll sit down and just go over some high level basics. I want the conversation to be as conversational as possible and just kind of make sure that there's no off limits areas they don't want to go to or anything like that. And so I met with Trevor upstairs and our conversation was already hilarious. So I don't know where this is going to go and what the essence of this podcast is going to be, but it should be an interesting conversation. So Trevor, thanks for being on the podcast.
I appreciate it, giving me the time to voice my opinions.
So what are these massive opinions that you wanted the world to hear?
I don't know that I wanted to vocalize any.
Are you nervous? You're twirling around in your chair like a kindergartner.
I always twirl around in my chair. I never stop moving, though. That's the thing.
All right, try to stop moving.
I always go fast. I always have to do something. My version of relaxing is just slowing down, never really stopping.
Fair enough.
But yeah, what do you want to start? What do you want to learn? What do you want to learn?
What do I want to learn?
This is about me teaching you. Am I a millennial or Gen Z? Which one am I?
You're Gen Z.
Oh, okay. As a Gen Z, I'm here to educate you.
Because you are how old?
22. Yeah.
That took a lot of thought for 22.
It did. Age is just a number. That doesn't define me.
No, you're actually 100% right. I actually believe that every single person on this planet could learn from every other single person on this planet if we would sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's actually at the core and the spirit of my podcast is just sitting down and getting to know somebody and seeing what I can learn from that individual. And what I really, honestly, do enjoy about you, unlike most other people that are 22 years old or in that general age range that work for Rocky Mountain, is you are blunt to a fault, potentially. Yeah. And you will tell me exactly what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And it gives me great insight into what's going on with you. And I never have any questions. If I ask, you're going to tell me where you're at. And I appreciate that. So I'm looking forward to where this conversation goes. So let's start where I normally start with everybody else. Tell me about your background. Where are you from?
I was born in San Diego, California.
I did not know that.
Yeah. My dad had just gotten out of being a Marine and honorably discharged. He had some injuries. And then after that, I lived there for 3 whole years. Loved it there when I was 3.
So you remember it?
No, not at all. I don't remember anything. Parents decided that they didn't want to do that anymore. They'd gone down to Alaska earlier in their lives, and so they decided to pick up everything and move to Alaska. Not knowing anything, all family left behind, whole 9 yards, started brand new in Alaska. They decided to settle in Anchorage, Alaska. And then kind of after that, we moved out to some of the more boony sides of Alaska, one of those being Wasilla, Palmer, where I then lived for another 7 or so years until I was 18 or 19. And then I drove my truck through Canada with 2 dogs and everything I could fit in it, all the way down to Westminster, Colorado, where I then met back up with my soon-to-be fiance, Kennedy. And then after that, I kind of got back into what I've always known, what I've always done ever since I was small, which was using my hands and building stuff. I took that to electrical, where I then worked for 3.5 years, almost getting a journeyman's license. And then I approached you early this year, around February, saying, long and the short of it, that you were wasting money and that I could help you.
And it was a very well put out presentation of the ways you could save us money on our property maintenance, construction, and other services that we were outsourcing to third parties, which I respected and appreciated.
And I think the biggest move for me, anyways, to coming to Rocky Mountain was not only a little bit more of a freedom as far as what I do, how I do it, and managing my own time, space, and money, but the big thing for me was having more opportunity and more chances to take off.
So we'll poke around on that here shortly. We'll get to your career. I want to know what it was like growing up in a place like Wasilla. So Wasilla's what, about an hour north of Anchorage?
Yep, hour north of Anchorage.
So suburbs, kind of an extreme example, but it's as close as Anchorage has to suburbs.
Yeah, I think there were 2 grocery stores in that city. Besides that, if you went north, you were 250 miles from the nearest grocery store, and if you went south, it was 60, 70 miles to Anchorage, which is another nearest convenience store.
So what was it like growing up in Wasilla?
4-wheelers to prom, 4-wheelers everywhere. There were more unpaved roads in the city that I grew up in than there were paved roads. There were more access points for 4-wheelers, ATVs, snow machines, and off-road equipment than there was usable terrain for vehicles. And what that kind of brought to a young boy like myself at the time was opportunity and the chance to explore. You know, I never was clean. I was always covered in dirt, always getting myself into trouble, mischief, cops, the whole 9 yards. Nothing too illegal, but I'd always just wander into places I probably shouldn't have.
All right, we'll leave that topic alone. You know the first thing that comes to my mind when someone says Wasilla, Alaska?
What's that? Sarah Palin?
Sarah Palin.
Oh, you know, she can see Russia from her house. But I never met her. I met her husband, though.
What's the population of Wasilla?
A few hundred, maybe a few thousand.
Did you ever see her?
No. I saw her husband. Her husband is really cool. He was an Iditarod musher, and he actually has a lot of land and is pretty prominent in the community. And then he also did the Iron Dog.
Did you go to school with your kids or anything?
No. I barely went to school as is, bud. I just kind of lied and cheated my way through high school.
And you want to put that out to the world?
I'm totally fine with that. It was a complete waste of time. Now when somebody tells me to do something, I can get paid for it. I can experience, I can network, I can do things with my time and energy except for getting a grade and learning about calculus that I'll never use. Reckon there are a few things that I learned, like algebra and reading and writing, that are pretty prominent right now.
Algebra's usable in construction all the time.
But as far as like managing your checks, planning for your retirement one day, making sure you have good credit and all that stuff, high school doesn't do any of that shit for you.
I know. I do talk about that all the time. Like, you don't learn any of the actual stuff of how to live life in school.
Yep.
They don't teach you any of that, those basics.
They just tell you to go into college where you'll get a degree in the mastering of
You memorize lists of
BS and then recite it back on a piece of paper in some vulgar manner.
Yeah.
And then you get a grade on it.
Yeah. From that regard, I'm not a big fan of our current educational system. All right, so let's pick back up on your story. So you left Wasilla, Alaska, came to Colorado. What was that transition like? Had you traveled much outside of Alaska prior to coming to Colorado?
I'd gone to Panama, where I have some family on my father's side, and I'd gone down.
Panama is in the country of Panama?
Panama City, Panama.
As in the canal.
Yeah, like
okay.
Most of my family actually shut down the
¿Hablas
canal.
español?
No, hell no.
Okay.
Right, it's too much for me.
Okay.
English is already a hard enough language for me. But I'd done some traveling down to like New York and Pennsylvania, which is where some of my mom's family's at, but never really like, let's dump everything into a truck that we can, sell off the rest, fly my girlfriend at the time down with 5 bags of clothing and stuff, and start this whole brand new life in the good old Colorado, and just see where it takes me. And we kind of made that decision just because Alaska is a great place to enjoy the outdoors and to make a good career. But you have to be established in a sense. You kind of have to have that name for yourself. You have to be known as the biggest, most badass construction worker or a hands-down top-notch electrician or whatever your skill or trade might be. You kind of already have to be established in it in Alaska, because the thing about Alaska is there's no, hey, we're going to test you out for a week or we're going to test you out for a month. It takes 2 years just to become a laborer so that you can eventually become an apprentice as an electrician in Alaska. I applied for 2 years straight, got denied because they want to see 3 to 5 years of continuing application for that labor job. So there is no do-overs, there's no second chances, there's no I'll give you a chance in Alaska. So I was struggling as a young individual. Do I sit there and I work the 9-to-5 job at some BS establishment, or do I try to make a name for myself? And at the time I was working at Home Depot, and Home Depot is great. As for a young adult, I think it's a great place to work.
Wasilla has a Home Depot?
Yes, they have one Home Depot and one Lowe's. Again, I think the nearest Home Depot and Lowe's is either Anchorage, or if you go north, it's in Fairbanks.
Wow.
And Fairbanks is like 500 miles north. So I'd worked there, and I was just kind of like burnt out, bored. So we moved. And Home Depot was great because I was able to transition straight into a job when I moved down here, working for them. So I already had money coming in. I wasn't worried about money, but I was worried about my future. Do I work at a GameStop for the rest of my life, or do I become
aiming high?
Yeah, do I become the CEO of God only knows what?
Prior to moving down to Colorado, what were your aspirations?
I don't know. So that was the big thing. I was a blank slate with nothing more than
You just knew you liked to work with your hands.
Yeah, just some general skills and a whole bunch of BS behind any argument.
Where'd you learn to work with your hands? You are relatively skilled that can do just about any handyman job that we have around here. Who taught you all that?
Legos. So it's a British company now.
Danish.
Oh, it is. Okay, so Legos was a huge thing in my childhood.
If you're not sure, you should watch the Brickumentary.
I should. I know they make a few TV shows, but I don't have time for that. But Legos was a huge thing in my childhood. I'll devote thousands of my dollars that I've earned based off of
Legos.
Legos, yep. And they're a timeless classic. But I've just always been... The thing about Alaska is you can't just go down and buy a shed at Home Depot. Or at least you couldn't anymore. At Home Depot, you can go down and you can buy a shed, or you can hire somebody to build a shed for you. It's kind of you against everything out there. Everything, animals, nature, other people, the weather, everything wants to get you in Alaska. So it's always like that battle, like 3 feet of snow in the morning, you have to wake up 2 hours just to get your car out of the driveway kind of thing. So in Alaska, the opportunity to not be good with your hands is very limited, especially when you get out of the bigger cities like Juneau, Alaska, Anchorage, and Fairbanks. Once you get out of those larger cities where everything is kind of similar to the lower 48, you are really just a person trying to live.
Is that the psyche of most people from Alaska?
Yeah, once you get out of the city. The cities are really like the butthole of Alaska. Just because everybody there has this mindset that they own it all, and they don't. Because if you step outside your front door for too long, a moose will trample you, or the nature will get you. And they have all these remedies and fancy stuff that keeps them happy there. But that's not the true nature of Alaska.
So at 22 years old, looking back, San Diego history that you don't remember, most of your life in Alaska, and a few years here in Colorado, do you like Alaska? Would you live back up there? Or from what I hear, it would not be high on your list.
There's two sides of that argument for me. There's a part of me that says 150% I'd go back to Alaska tomorrow. Just because there's nothing like Alaska. To walk outside your front door and just Mother Nature at its finest, there's no comparison. I know Colorado loves to be 14ers and...
Colorado's good for the lower 48, but I've been to Alaska many times. It's not Alaska.
Yeah, it's breathtaking out there. And the people you meet out there, it's just awesome. But then there's the other side of me that's like hustle hard, win big, best foot forward at all the times, never stop working, that can't see myself going back to Alaska. Not anytime soon anyways.
Question that just popped in my head. Growing up, going to high school, friends, whatever, was the consensus that most people wanted to stay there or get out of Alaska?
I think it's every high schooler. Every high schooler, middle schooler just wants to disappear. Anywhere away from their hometown is where everybody wants to go.
So for you, did that matter whether I was in Alaska or out of Alaska?
I never would have seen myself leaving Alaska.
Really?
Never in a million years, all the way leading up to the time I actually left, I never would have seen myself leaving Alaska.
How did you feel then when you were driving away with that truck fully loaded?
I try not to think about it. The decision was made.
Doesn't matter, but that's not what my question was. How did you feel?
Excited? Not really nervous, but like...
Was there any sadness at all of leaving Alaska behind?
Alaska, not really. I'm very family and like friend oriented. The connection and that networking you make with people over 18 years, 17 years I lived in Alaska.
You had a girl waiting for you down in Denver, but you had a mom
Yeah.
that you were leaving behind in Wasilla.
That's the part that hurt the most.
Yeah.
Or that I put the most emotion into, was the thought that I left all my friends and family and the people that, you know, made me into the person I was. That's what took up the most space in my head, especially for the 5 days it took.
So you've been down here now for almost 3 years, right? Be 3 years in August?
3 or 4 years.
Is it wow? I'm off
I think
even on that.
2022 will be 4 years, so yeah, like 3.5 now.
So with 3.5 years of perspective, what do you think of that adventure that you took off on that day?
Probably the best thing I've ever done. It was Grant Cardone. I know you've read a lot of his stuff. He always says that if you're comfortable, you're going to get, you know, complacent. You know, you're going to get bored, you're going to get tired, the whole 9 yards. But whenever you're comfortable or you're happy, or that all is complacency, and it just builds off of that like lackadaisical laziness. And you don't ever want to push yourself after that. And that's where I was in Alaska when I moved. Because I was I sat there, all due respect to those who work at Home Depot for their entire life, but I sat there and I was like, dude, Home Depot, fucking great. $12 an hour, like, that's perfect. I could do anything I wanted there. But the second I disembarked and I left Alaska and I separated that side of myself, I look back and I was like, I don't know how I could have ever done that. Like, the things I'm capable of doing, the places I'm capable of going, and the people that I've made interactions with, and the community ties, little, but I still have in Colorado, are just mind-boggling, that I never would have ever seen myself in. And I almost thought, and I think back all the time, that I used to be happy working at that boring job where there's like 18 people on top of you telling you what to do. And now I check in with people once or twice a day, and besides that, I make miracles happen.
So other than you coming to Colorado for your fiance, did you have any antsiness that was prodding you internally to leave Alaska outside of that? Or do you think if it wasn't for your fiance, you'd still be there?
Oh, hands down.
Really?
I totally, she was the one. They always say, like, never narc on any of your significant other's ideas because, or choices because you were one of them, right? Well, the more and more you think about that, the more and more it kind of like, okay, I understand that. And she came to me with this solution and this idea of Colorado and all the wonderful happy rainbows. And I was just kind of like not into it. You know, I was still satisfied with Home Depot. I was still satisfied with, I always like to talk about numbers, but I was satisfied with $11 an hour or $12 an hour. I think it was like $11.45 or something. And I was happy with that. And then the more and more I thought about it, I was like, what's the worst that can happen? You know, I just work back at a Home Depot. Like, not saying it's bad, but I knew for a fact I could find a Home Depot job or a scale job at that level of common sense.
So you were 18, 19 years old. You had limits on your belief, and you didn't even know it at that point, is what you're saying.
Yeah. I'd capped myself before I'd even gone
Before you
anywhere
even started.
Yep. And until I moved from Alaska and until she had told me about leaving Alaska, that's all I was ever going to be, was that Alaska kid. So it changed a lot. And, like, I'd always said to myself, like, oh, dude, I want to own my own business. Or I want to do my own thing. I want to be something. You know, I might be the best damn carpenter, plumber, electrician, general contractor in Wheat Ridge, but I'm going to be something, you know. That's what I was always wanting to be as a kid. And the second I got to Home Depot and I got a taste of $11 an hour, I just kind of like laid down and got satisfied.
So how does that relate to where you're at now? What are your aspirations now?
It's just more.
What are they?
More everything. This is the part where I'm going to come off as a straight, but I want more money, more ability to go places, more time off, more time to work. I want 24 hours to be 36 hours.
So why is that going to come off like a you want more?
Because we had talked about millennials and Gen Z and culture and the clashing of ages at the beginning, correct?
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of sensitive now, and if you want to make $80,000 a year, but little Jimmy over here can only make 36, that's not really fair. And that's kind of how I've seen the culture kind of grow as I've thrown myself more and more into people and work and places and things.
But isn't the real world, as Taylor likes to say, a meritocracy?
It is.
Like the more value you bring to the world, the more you're worth.
Yep. Everything is based off of how much you can bring. And even if what you're bringing is nonsense, BS, and emotions, it can pay immensely. And your value increases exponentially. What you want to bring is a high school diploma and some BS and late work and crappy work, then you're not going to be worth anything and you're not going to be paid for it. But certain people don't see it that way, and all I want is more. Like I want to be able to do so much that after everything's said and done, people sit there and they go, Jesus, he was only 84 and he lived to 136 if you factor in overtime, you know? Like that's what I want to be. I want to be the guy that, you know, seen the world twice and just go for it, you know?
I heard it described once, like the more value you bring to the world, the more money you're going to earn. Like if you want to be a millionaire, and as a general rule, impact 1 million lives.
Yeah.
If you want to be a billionaire, figure out how to impact 1 billion lives.
If I can convince I think I'll build off of what I think Grant Cardone said. If he can get everybody to pay him $1, he'll have $7-point-something billion in the bank right now. So just imagine if you can sell something for $3 to everybody. Like how much money you can bring in. And for me, I want to impact people in more than just buy this from me or buy my time. I want to impact people in more of a heartfelt manner. You know, I want you to, after I walk out of the room, be like, you know what, that Trevor, you know, he's going to go places, or, you know, he's touched me right here, you know.
You're here because you have affected me. You're a very interesting personality, but I want to poke around on this because this is not at the core of what you've talked about so far. You have not talked about, I want to impact people. I want to touch people.
That's kind of like my own, like, we all practice something in the mirror every morning. We always tell each other something or practice a motto or a phrase or a mannerism we want to start using, right? I believe that. If somebody wants to say that they don't, I call on it. I think every morning we tell each other in the mirror something. And for me, that's always just, what can I do better? How can I level up every single month? How can I level up every single year? Do I get more tools? Do I get more experience? Do I read more books? Do I go see more of the world? Like, how do I improve myself, or how do I get more than what I had yesterday?
Are you saying this metaphorically or specifically? What do you say to yourself in the mirror, metaphorically or mentally?
It's always, for me, I've told you this a few times. I'm a hammer, and everything looks like nails to me. So if I want to, let's just say I have this irk, this itch, this drive to go to the Philippines. For me, I don't sit there and I go, well, how am I going to have the time off? Or like, I don't come up with these excuses. I just find an excuse to go, you know. Can I convince my employer that there's some
Side
general
note, is this a real itch that you have? Or did you pick that up out of? Because if you want to talk about the 7,107 islands of the Philippines, I'd love to have a conversation with you about that.
You know, one day we'll go to 700 and how many islands?
7,107.
We'll go to every single one.
I mean, do you really want to go to the Philippines?
Might as well.
But I mean, do you know anything about the Philippines?
Fuck no, but what's...
Okay, then back to what you were saying.
Okay, so this is my point, though. Like, if I find a need or an itch, whether it be a tool or a drive to go on a vacation, spend more time with my fiance, whatever it is, I just find a way to do it. And that's my more. Whatever I crave or whatever I hunger, whether it be like, I want to gain more knowledge, read a book. I want to learn how to socialize with people better. Ask Shane what book to read. You know, it's whatever that hunger or drive is, it's just finding a way for me. Like, Gen Z and millennials, one of the things I hear more than not is excuses. Everybody wants to say an excuse. Everyone wants to give you a reason why that can't be achieved. If you ask for an excuse, or you ask for what's going to make this project difficult, I'll tell you everything you want to know about why it's going to be difficult. But if you don't want to know, I'm not going to tell you. That's my job. My job is to find a way. My job is when a customer wants $1 million granite, my job is to figure out how that's going to get achieved.
Why do you think that's such a pandemic amongst millennials and Gen Z? Do you have any thoughts on that? And if you don't know, you don't know.
So I believe it was Joe Rogan on his podcast. He said, hard men make easy times make weak men make hard times. And I truly believe we're in an easy time state. I think the hard men have got us to this easy, relaxed state. And now we have all of these people that are coming off of that, and everybody wants to talk about how stuff's handed to them and how the phones and technology. And the phones and technology, I think, is BS. It's a tool. And if you choose to look at it any other way than it being a tool, you're never going to go anywhere. If you can't capitalize on a tool that's practically free now, internet phones, and the ability to call people across the world is practically free now. You can go just about anywhere and ask for a phone. So if people want to look at that any other way than besides a tool, they're only going to hurt themselves and incriminate themselves.
Couldn't agree more.
And right now, it's just that everybody wants things to continuously be handed to them based off of what a cell phone and the internet can provide them without ever doing any work. And I don't think that's ever going to get there. And I think it's going to drive this economy and this reality into a hard time because of the weak man. Not saying men, women, whatever. But sure. I think as of right now, everybody is clashing with each other because everybody gets offended and nobody wants to just put their foot down and find a resolution. And that's what frustrates me more than anything in my day-to-day world.
So what makes you different than all the other stereotypical millennials and Gen Zs out there from this mindset? Does Alaska have anything to do with it? Was it the way you were raised? Is it all the above? Was it something else we haven't touched on today?
I've never told you this. So I think a lot of it has to do with the way I was raised. Alaska is probably most likely a huge contribution to that. But like, my dad is a Marine, honorably discharged. He had injuries, hell of a dude. My mom, law enforcement her entire life. Still is in law enforcement. Going to retire here in the next 3 years after doing 25 years. So there's just nothing but hardcore, no slack, maximum respect in my childhood. And there was no, like my dad always used to say, if you were going to do something, you better do it right or just don't do it at all. Because there's somebody that will do it right for you. And it was hard, you know. There was no like, good job, you got an A. It was like, okay, then what are the other grades? Are they all A's? Why aren't they all A's? Why are some of them B's? Why are some of them C's? Like, why aren't you doing up here? There was never a bar in which I could climb to satisfy that hunger and drive for what my parents wanted from me. And it sucked as a child. And as somebody who wasn't able to look back on, or as somebody who wasn't able to understand what that mentality and ideology gave me, it just sucked, you know? There was no childhood. It was always just like, how far can I push you to make you achieve greatness? And now looking back on it, one of the best things, or one of the most number one points in which I can point to my success as a 22-year-old adult. Like, God, they were just, but like,
okay. So if we go back to the hard times make great men, what was your?
It was hard men make easy times make hard men, hard men make easy times.
All right, so you had a hard time making a strong man.
Yeah, if you look at it that way. And right now, it's like, it's easy times right now. There's like 1,000,001 ways to make dough, you know? In the trades, especially as an electrician, we're one of the higher paid people on a job site, typically. And there was always a thing that all the managers used to say. They're like, you can only get paid so much for being strong. And then the next bracket is you can only be paid so well for knowing how to use your strength. And then the number one paying thing in the world is your brain. No longer the hands. The reason why I make as much money, or the reason I am so successful as 22 years old, is not just because I can know how to lift stuff and build stuff. It's just because I know how to do that and incorporating my head into it as well.
So we'll shift gears on that. How did being taught that influence your shifting from being in the vertical of becoming a master electrician to coming and approaching Rocky Mountain? How did that mindset affect that?
I think a lot of it has to do with, by all means, blue collar in the trades, I think is one of the best things that Americans can do. I don't say you have to do it for the rest of your life.
Undervalued.
Yeah.
Don't you agree in America today?
Yeah. Working with your hands and like seeing what somebody has to go through to provide you HVAC or a nice carpet and a nice roof, I think it's very underappreciated. But there's huge faults in it still. And I think you've talked a lot about that on your little separate shows with Blue Collar Blueprint, and how you incorporate the white collar and the blue collar, especially in this business. I think you guys do a great job at that. But you guys have been able to see some of the flaws that are still in the blue collar tradition. And, you know, management styles and all the stuff like that is what really brings down the trades in the blue collar. Because I've been on job sites, everything from like DIA, Denver International Airport, all the way down to Aurora's freshwater plant and to Denver's ship plant. And what I always used to see in those jobs is just money being wasted, money and time, because of the inability to teach, the inability to understand something, or just lack of common sense. And that frustrated me. I like to be as efficient as I can. And a lot of the times I'll make a mistake on a job that'll set me back $1,000 whatever dollars, or maybe it sets me back in time. But that failure or that loss is only fuel to the fire for me to be more efficient. I just take that.
You learn from it.
Yeah, I take that shitty situation and I make it bloom, you know? And I left being an electrician as a almost fourth year, so almost a licensed journeyman by the state of Colorado.
Does that just come with time or testing? How does that
work? It
work?
comes with time. So it's to be a journeyman in Colorado, It's a minimum of 2 years of schooling, and 8,000 hours of OJT, on the job training. When I left, I was at 7,200, so 800
Wow.
hours short.
And you still approach me.
And I still approached you, and I was just finishing up my second year with a continuing 98 course average.
Wow.
So I was in the top 7 of my class in Colorado.
So back on topic, what prompted you, being that close to being a journeyman, to say, I want to see if Rocky Mountain would bring me on?
God, there's so much, though. I was a foreman. I was a foreman on every job they put me on.
Did you like it?
No.
Why?
Because I would have efficiencies, goals, and thought processes that wouldn't agree with the older folk, or wouldn't satisfy the lazy managers, because they had done it since the dawn of time this way. But they never wanted to see anything else, and that frustrated me. I was leading 4 to 12 guys. 12 guys was the max I ever led. 4 was a typical day for me. I'd close down job sites. I went to 5 job sites in the last 6 months as an electrician, closing out job sites, getting them back on schedule that were millions and millions of dollars in the hole, closing those jobs out, going to the next job, closing those jobs out, getting them to the next job. And it sucked. And I was never, ever, ever, ever able to pitch my own ideas. I'd always be going from somebody up top. But yet I had the choice, and I had the responsibility to lead 4 guys, 6 guys, effectively and efficiently, following somebody else's motto that had been made in the early 80s. And that irritated me, because there's so much money that could be wasted. The reason why these jobs are millions of dollars in the hole is because of men like that.
Yeah,
And
I've definitely seen that in aspects of our industry, mills and whatnot, or other people that are old timers in distribution or dealer levels of like, we don't do it that way. Well, why not? Because it's never been done that way.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I
so
think that's
that
just
stagnation of thinking is a real problem.
And it's like,
It makes me wonder too. I don't know. I've never really heard the theory you talked about hard times make strong men, and all. And that whole theory makes me wonder if that stagnation of thought is a product of easy times. Mm-hmm. You know, you're not being forced to innovate.
yeah, and that's exactly what it is. That motivation to, tomorrow I could be homeless. That will drive a man or a woman further than anything in the world. Some people don't care about that. Some people are more in their head than they are in the physical. There's no right or wrong in that situation, but it's like, I think everybody can contribute something.
Well, I want to stay on topic though a little bit. I agree with you. So you were dissatisfied in your current job, but why did you want to come to Rocky Mountain? What else was on your horizon? If you were that dissatisfied, you must have been looking at other options. Why did you end up saying Rocky Mountain? What was it that you saw at Rocky Mountain?
So, leading up to that decision, I'd done side jobs for you guys. You guys needed small things accomplished that costed way too much if you went with just a general contractor. And in that opportunity to help you guys, there's one thing that set everything aside for me. I'd seen laborers sweep the floor for 12 hours, 24/7. Like every single day at DIA, they were labor sweeping the floor, and they were miserable. I'd seen master electricians that make so much money it's not even funny. They drink 90% of it away, completely unhappy with their job. But there's one thing at Rocky Mountain Forest Products that I had never seen before, and that was everything from a yard guy to a guy cleaning the toilets to a mid-level and a top-level salesman all the way up to leadership. Everybody had a smile on their face. Everybody was joking around. I remember there was one time I was working for you guys at your Tabor division. Really cool guy. I've really grown to interact with him on a much deeper level than just a hi. I was building furniture for some salesmen that they were moving. And he's like, "Oh, dude, have you ever tried beef jerky?" And it was this crazy brand of spicy buffalo beef jerky. And I'd never once been approached as a person that works with my hands and someone who is of service to others, I'd never been approached with such kindness before. On a job site, you shit in toilets and porta potties, even if there's a toilet 5 feet away from you. Even if it's more convenient to go to the toilet than it is to the porta potty, as construction workers, you get looked down upon.
So what did that mean to you when he offered that beef jerky to you?
You know, the fat boy in me was enthused. You know, food's great. You know, that's the Achilles heel of me. But like, the level of kindness I think a person shows sometimes can be seen as weakness, but for me, it's just it's a strength. You know, that man is so empowered and enthused about where he works that he offers me something he had to pay out of his own pocket, whether it's a $9 piece of beef jerky or 50 cents worth of gum. Like, that kindness to me only showed me that Rocky wasn't shoving numbers down people's throat or wasn't shoving product and knowledge, and you weren't forcing people to do their job. They were just naturally coming to you and doing a great job. And that's what struck me.
So now, having been here 6 months, and never having asked this question before or after on camera or whatever, has working at Rocky met your expectations?
No. Hands down, no. My expectations were like, hopefully I'll have fun here. Maybe I can make something happen here. But like, the reason why I've never asked this question is because I rarely see you. Because I create my own schedule. I get a freedom that I've never had the ability to use to the full potential that I have here. I've always been entrusted with thousands of dollars and making budgets and time schedules and all of that stuff. But at Rocky, it's just like, go for it. You know, if you fuck up, like, we'll see you in 24 hours, you know. But you give a certain level of trust to people, which most of the time works out great. Sometimes it doesn't, but there's corrective actions to sort that. But I've never, ever, I work my ass off. Like, I told you this morning that I forgot about this podcast entirely because I was getting ready to floor and roof a shed. But I was sweeping at 9 o'clock last night in my basketball shorts and Dairy Queen and my dog. Just doing my thing, you know. You didn't ask me to come in. My direct supervisor didn't ask me to come in. But it's just like, I left unfinished business and it needed to be finished, so I just came back. Wasn't clocked on or anything. It just, freedom for me is partially freedom, but it's more of like, it's a trust thing. Like, you trust me to do a good job, and for that freedom actually allows me to be more of a valuable asset to you guys, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah. So what, am I reading this correctly, that it exceeded your expectations working here?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I don't think there were any.
I wasn't afraid to necessarily ask that question, but so that's an interesting question I've never asked before. So let's finish up with this. Having a Gen Z mindset, growing up in Alaska, having a hard environment to grow up in to make you a strong man, going to work as an apprentice and just on the verge of journeyman electrician, and not liking that job and coming here. If you could evolve the world, if you could change the big picture, how should society change to become more productive and happier, where more people could come to work and enjoy themselves, work harder, have a more effective society? This is the way I think. I'm always thinking meta level. And I hear that in the underpinnings of everything you're saying.
Yeah.
And that's why I say that inside you is one of the smartest people I've ever met. You just haven't had a chance to express all this stuff yet. How would, if you could evolve society, how would you evolve it?
Ice cream every Tuesday. I think as a whole, in order to, one of the things my mom always taught me is it's always good to be in service, to work a job where you are in service to somebody, because it teaches you the values of how important and how stressful that individual's job may or may not be. So that understanding of both sides of the coin, whether you are the one paying or you are the one working for that paycheck, I think is invaluable.
So it gives you empathy. It lets you put yourself in other people's shoes.
And that empathy just in the struggles an individual may or may not face, I think is one of the only defining things that can make the country a whole again. You know, when everybody was at war, we knew what war was. We didn't want war. We wanted beautiful sunflowers and roses, you know, because we understood how distraught and miserable that hard time was. So we did everything in our power to create utopia. And from what's the legal working age now? 14, 16? Whatever the legal working age.
Well, ask HR.
Yeah. An individual coming into the workforce, I feel, should always have to work the dirty jobs, micro. Always should have to work some of those just jobs you don't ever want to work again. Because that understanding of that will make you appreciate when you have to work overtime or when you're pushing the envelope just a little bit harder and a little bit better and a little bit faster and using less money or whatever your job might entail, whatever doing it better is, unless you understand how crappy it may be, I don't think you can ever get that.
A lot of truth to that. You know, I've said many times, my first job here was actually the cleaning crew on the weekends.
Yeah.
And I've worked every job here. I've delivered loads of lumber. I've worked in the yard for summers, and I've done sales. I've done everything on the way up. And I think that gives me appreciation, perspective, and empathy for every position at this company.
Yeah. And I was like, you can't have too much pride to sweep the floor, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that hits hard with me because I think you have to. You can't just be the guy that rules from the top without sweeping the floor.
How would you change society?
Yeah.
You still haven't told me that.
That's exactly how I would change society.
You would make everyone... So
I'm not a
metaphorically speaking,
I'm not a
everyone needs
dictator,
to start by sweeping the floor.
Agreed. I'm
Okay.
not a dictator, but I will say, you know, sweep the damn floor.
Gives you
Somebody's got to do it.
perspective.
You know, if you can't... The Eiffel Tower is a beautiful building, but if it's got ugly carpet, shitty floors, disgusting bathrooms, it's not as pretty as it used to be anymore. So unless everything like that is taken care of, which there are a lot of dirty jobs, as Micro always used to say, somebody's got to do them. And I think those entry-level gross jobs are exactly what people need to do. And I'm not saying it's like a 3-year, you know, go, you know, lick the crap off the floor, but I think everybody should experience it.
Your metaphors are interesting. You're a crude dude.
They're rough. There's a lot of crude things in my life, but I do think that everybody needs to experience what it's like to be at the bottom in order to achieve the best.
So where are you going, Trevor? What's your path? What's your trajectory? What are your aspirations? As they're bigger, you know, they got bigger as you came down from Alaska, and like you talked about how when I started at Home Depot, I was like, this is fine, this is good. And then you got down here, you started thinking bigger. So you're probably thinking bigger now than you were even 6 months ago. So
I think bigger every day, you know.
That in my mind, that's an awesome thing. So
yeah.
So where are you thinking today? We're filming this July 21st, 2021. What are you thinking today? Subject to change. You can revise it at any time. It's just for posterity's sake. Where's your head at today?
It's just more, you know, leveling myself up. I want to go travel the world. I want to impress and beautifilize everything I do. I don't even know if that's a real word. Beautify everything I do. And I want to leave the room speechless. Whether it be myself speechless or somebody else, you know.
Well, at the very least, I can respect the hell out of that. I mean, that's just putting your own mark on the world and making it a better place than you found it.
Yeah.
And if every person on Earth would just do that small thing, make the world a better place than they found it, then we would be living in utopia.
Yeah. And I think that hits deep, you know.
Well, man, I'm really glad that you're a part of Rocky Mountain. I love how colorful of a character you are, and I love how unfiltered you are around me. It's, for better or worse, man, very few people in your age bracket are that way around me, and I respect the fact that you're just you, unapologetically so, 24/7. Respect that a lot. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that you took the time to share a little bit of your story and your perspective on life with everyone. And I'm hoping, especially people from my age group, from the Gen X's, that have a tendency to discard everything that this generation has to say, we should listen to them. Doesn't mean that everything they say is correct, but it gives you an insight into their perspective. I think we do far too much discounting, not enough listening. And I think hopefully this conversation will inspire you to have a conversation with the millennials and Gen Zs in your life, that you can learn from them and see how they see the world, because it's working together that we can make the world a better place. Trevor Farrar, thank you for being here.
Thanks, sir.